welcome to Fox Valley today on a very gloomy but very mild Monday. I think we were all glad to put away the mittens, I think, for a day or two. Joining me on today's program is Amaal Tokars, who is the Executive Director from the Kendall County Health Department. And good morning, Amaal, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Nice, mild, kind of gloomy, but
foggy,
but you could put the coat on the extra seat of the car and just drive freely today.
That's
I think.
Right.
Huh?
That's right.
So, Amaal, how long have you been with the Kendall County Health Department?
About 12 years.
And you started there doing what?
I started there as an administrator.
Okay. And you have been the executive director now for how many years?
For about 5.
5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You enjoy that position?
I do. I enjoy the work. I enjoy the diversity of the work.
Uh-huh. About how many people are you employing there?
There are about 50 persons working in the community at the health department, yeah.
We always enjoy having some of your folks over. This is kind of a big month for the health department with WSPY and the Fox Valley Today program. We've had Terry Olson, we're going to have Adam Johnson on, we've had yourself. It seemed to me that we maybe had something else going on too, but sometimes we like to kind of catch up on some of the bigger things going on over there. I know you like to always come on the first part of the year and talk a little bit about what's going on at the health department and some of the issues that you think that are really important for people to remember, and maybe some of the services that you would like to highlight that people might be able to take advantage of during this. You know, and I don't care how you look at it, this is still, those folks who have jobs and are thriving, I might say thriving, or doing well, getting by. They're taking care of their families, making their house and car payments, and being able to pay their utility bills. That's kind of a sweet spot. Mm-hmm. There are others that are not so fortunate.
That's right. Today I'm going to talk about mindfulness, but I want to go ahead and start with that question because it's a wonderful question. What are some of the services that are out there that are very, very important to people? There are so many, but I'm going to mention 4 or 5 that are very relevant to people. Our weatherization science area is an area where persons on very modest and fixed incomes benefit from greatly, and that's where our staff go in to people's homes. First, people have to see if they're eligible, and they check on that. We don't have a choice, and those requirements really come from the state and the federal government. But if they are, then we go in and we assess their home for weather competence, in a sense. How weather tight is the house from a health perspective? And then we actually bring contractors in to mitigate issues that we see and go back and check their work. Mm-hmm. So not only does that make the house much more comfortable for the family, but that piece of the pie that they have to give up on utility costs every year will go down, which is very important for those families. So it has a permanent advantage for the home, and a permanent advantage for the socioeconomic condition of that family. So go ahead.
And I would think that would be very important. Sometimes as you see seniors age, they want to age in place. They may have smaller homes, but have not been able to do the proper weatherization.
Yes.
And those are where you can step in and say, maybe we could help you out with this.
That's right. So that's very important. Our behavioral health services are very important as well. So whether an individual is struggling with a mental health issue like depression or struggling with an addiction issue, those are things that we want to be able to help them with. And we work with many parents that bring their adolescents into us for either anxiety or some worry about them dabbling in substances or full addiction or both. Mm-hmm. And so we want to be able to help those individuals as much as we can. In our environmental health area, I think that most people know that a health department permits every food establishment in the county and goes in and checks on those. And we have very wonderful partners in those management environments. Those restaurants are generally very, very committed to those same great standards. But what a lot of people don't know is the work that we're doing in prevention of Lyme disease and tick surveillance. And those are some really important things as well, because Lyme disease is something that for many years we associated with the northeast of the United States, and that is true. And we see these very same ticks now that we, in my childhood, never would.
Saw 'em.
Right, we were seeing dog ticks, but now we're seeing deer ticks. And so we want to make people aware of that, and we're doing surveillance on that. And we know that this is preventable. And so it's just important that people realize what they need to do to protect themselves in that area.
Do you have a personal opinion on why the deer ticks have spread?
Well, the literature really points to that. There's a number of issues. One is the deer population has grown magnificently. So that's definitely part of it. And the other piece is that ticks are very resilient when there is not a complete freeze. They can live in cold weather when we're not having a complete long freeze. And we have not had long freezes in the winter for a number of years now.
Now, would you say what we've just experienced through the last part of December all the way until, you might say, I mean, our ground is still froze now, even with this rain and kind of mild weather we've had in the last couple of days, we've still got to have 36 inches of frost on the ground. That's what you would call a good hard freeze.
Well, the ticks are above the ground.
Okay.
So it's really, it would really be a winter that doesn't have these fluctuating temperatures where we're going down to almost 50 degrees or into the 40s, and they can move about in the 30s sometimes as well. So without these long, and we have to learn a lot more about them as well. But our winters have changed, and that changes what these vectors or insects, what their reproduction looks like.
I know the other day we had Terry Olson on, your public, your director of community health, and she talked about that in terms of the flu, viruses, that without that hard freeze, things just don't die off earlier, and that we had such a warm, kind of damp and moldy fall that things just seem to harbor down in there and just rise up to get us. So,
well, with the vectors, that is certainly the case for some, and we have so much more to learn. So there isn't a one answer, but we do know that there's an increased deer population, and we do know that our winters have changed in the last few years. So, and then speaking of community health, I think many people in the community know our community health work for the nutrition work and the education that we're doing with families, young families on nutrition. But the communicable disease, which is the piece that staff would have been speaking to you about, is very, very important, and very much often a behind the scenes piece that staff are tracking particular diseases that are coming into the area and wanting to make sure that people are protected of those. So that work is very time consuming and absolutely crucial.
yes, it is.
Yeah.
And I think I think she did a good job of explaining the different flu vaccines that people might have gotten and why some are more important than others to certain age groups.
Yes.
I thought Terry did a very, very good job. I want to back up just a little bit when you talked about adolescence and anxiety. I think every generation goes through their own anxious times for whatever it was. For me, as a young person, it was going through the Cuban Missile Crisis. It was watching some of our dear kids that we grew up with go off to a war into someplace at 18, 19 years old. It was that anxiousness there. What do you think the big issues are for the adolescents today?
Wow, that's a 5-program question, Anne.
Well, just if you could kind of encapsulate, because I don't want to miss what you want to hit today.
Well, some of that would relate to some things I would talk about with mindfulness, actually. So I'm going to say some of these things are not directly a stressor, but contribute to stressors. So first of all, a direct stressor that we all know is relational distress. Every age of person, from an infant to an elder, values relationships and needs them. Humanity needs them. And so relational distress is something that as society gets to be a faster pace, as norming comes from the social world more than the family, having relationships that are acceptable to all puts a lot of pressure on young people. So relational distress is a very significant psychosocial stressor. Digital distraction is an indirect distressor for youth and adults.
As in social media type things?
All kinds of electronic stimulation. In other words, if the digital access is not being used for something value added, then it may be just a distraction to attending to other things or developing relationships in a slower way, or even educating oneself in a deeper way. So digital distraction is, although we were just talking at a staff meeting about digital citizenry, because digital work is very value added, can be, but there requires a lot of discernment around that. And then anxiety, you bring up the term anxiety. Anxiety is so prevalent in our culture and in our youth culture as well, that many times individuals cannot exactly say what it is they're having anxiety about.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself,
it's just a feeling of constantly being on edge.
That's right.
Yeah, and that sucks a lot of adrenaline out of your body.
That's right.
You're constantly on the brink of either being very depressed or exploding.
That's right. For youth and adults, that is a very damaging experience to continue to go forward with, because there's a hovering of it that the person just can't seem to shed from them.
Yeah, that's right. It's there.
And it clouds all their experiences, clouds the perspective of lovely things, and takes sometimes that loveliness right and the joy right out of it.
Yeah. And I think that's what anxiety does. Certainly, as most normal people, had my share. And it does.
Human being.
It does. It takes the joy out of, and sometimes can take the hope.
Yes.
And one time my kids asked me, it's kind of funny that I don't want to go back to your mindfulness, but we were having a very brief discussion on religion, and one of the kids asked me, what would be my description of hell? And I said, no hope. And that would be the hopelessness. That would be having no hope for whatever, which I guess would be some type of depression. But to me, without hope, without feeling that there was something out there that made you want to keep going on, that would be my description of that here on earth.
Yeah, and preventing a person from thinking about the aspirations that are truly in front of them. It just prevents and causes an individual to just try to keep up rather than to see what actually is in front of them. Yes,
there's a lot more to it than our brief conversation here, which brings me to what you wanted to discuss today. And you wanted to talk about mindfulness.
And you know, Anne, it's so interesting that you brought up anxiety, because mindfulness I want to talk about it because it's a new year and so many people experience anxiety, and there is no quick fix for these things, but mindfulness is one of many things that can truly be helpful to individuals in their lives for a number of things, and especially with helping to attend to anxiety. So I thought I would say unless you were going to ask me what
No,
that is.
no, I want you to
You know,
keep
what
going.
that is. So mindfulness is actually an emotional and cognitive exercise that looks to focus on what's happening right now. What's happening right now. So these things, digital distraction, relational duress, and I'm going to say iterative rumination. And here's what I mean by that. So a rumination is a thought that accompanies anxiety. Sometimes we might not notice the thought, but it's something that is going around and around. And the iterative rumination, meaning it's bothering us more
And more each time.
and more.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the natural response to that iterative rumination is to quiet it, do something else, thus digital distraction, turn the TV on, get on the internet, begin texting, play loud music. Okay, so it doesn't matter if it's an old-fashioned digital distraction or a new one, but it is a natural way for the human being to quiet that iterative rumination.
So let's take this to another step. Iterative rumination. So that person that you may be having a relationship problem with, maybe it's someone at work, maybe it's a family member, maybe it's somebody in your church group. The minute they enter the room, the minute they come into your house, the minute you walk into your office, that anxiety of that person because of past experiences, because of what you think of that person, whatever it is, something they've done to you, something you've done to them, how does somebody take that down that level, begin to take that emotion and set it over here and be aware of why this is happening?
Okay, wonderful. So first we want to try to catch the rumination. Rather than the instinct of putting away, we want to catch the process, notice that it's occurred. In other words, it's very healthy for someone to notice that something is bothering them. So it's a wonderful opportunity. People don't want to notice it because if you don't have anything to do with it, if you can't act on it, then we think it's best not to notice. But it's important to notice it and know that we will be able to do something, although something ever so subtle, with it. So the first thing is to catch the rumination, catch ourselves in the process by saying, something is bothering me. What is it? Now, it's both emotional and cognitive. Cognitive meaning we're paying attention to what it is we're thinking, and emotion to what we're feeling. And you know, every personality is different. So some personalities they are going to catch what they're thinking. Another personality might catch what they're feeling. Either way is just fine. It's really marvelous if you can catch both, what you're thinking and what you're feeling. But some will do one more than the other. But catch it either way. Catch it. And then put your finger on as best you can, what is the source of it? Now often, if it's a person, it's easy to put your finger on that source. That person is being disrespectful to me. That person puts me down. That person teases me. But sometimes it's not as simple as that. Sometimes this trouble came from many other things,
right?
And this person was the trigger. But even to notice the trigger is a freeing thing. We don't have to psychoanalyze ourselves, but to even notice the trigger is an important exercise and a freeing thing. And so if the trigger is something that somebody said to try to control us or put us down or demean us, to put our finger on that and realize it. And then there are many things that one can do with that thought or with that recognition, but the recognition is absolutely essential. We can say, maybe I'm going to say something to that person the next time.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe that's not going to be practical because that person, we don't have enough relationship with that person that they would hear us. Or maybe it's not something that would be worth their while. But we may even put ourselves in the shoes of that person and say, you know what? That person doesn't really realize that that's what they're doing. They're not trying to be cruel, or maybe they do know, but they don't think it's a big deal. And so, each of us has to decide differently. Now, a child may need to tell an adult about that. A subordinate may tell their supervisor, but we also might say, you know what, overall, in the scheme of my conversations with this person, this is not such a big deal. So the point is that we try to put it in its proper place. And is there a break that we have to take, Anne?
Yeah, we're going to, but I just want you to kind of...
So we want to be able to put that in its proper place, and there are some other things that can be helpful with that as well. So one of the things to think about mindfulness is it's different from how we generally think about meditation, and that in meditation we are trying to push things out of our mind and just
free yourself
from
that feeling.
But in mindfulness, you are actually freeing yourself by putting it right here, ever so gently right here, naming it,
being aware of it,
and putting it in its proper place.
And I think most people, when they get into those situations, is their fear of how they're going to react. Their fear, is that going to get me? Is that going to start that big fight again? Is that going to put the person sniping at me? Are they going to embarrass me in that meeting of the office again? All that anxiety just continues to roll with it until you can get to it.
That's right.
We got to take a break.
Okay.
We'll be right back in a minute. We're going to talk a little bit more about how to be more mindful of all those things going on around you to make you have a better day and become a better person. We'll be right back.
So, I just moved in with this family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that! That's disgusting! Oh, poop already! You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
We'd do anything for kids. Yet 1 in 6 children in the U.S. struggle with hunger. Help end childhood hunger near you. Learn how at feedingamerica.org.
Your son wants to get a cat, but you're allergic. Do you A, prepare yourself, B, make the best of it,
C squared equals
25.
Good job!
or C, find a loophole? When it comes to parenting, there are no perfect answers, but that's okay, because you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Teens in foster care will love you just the same.
Welcome back to Fox Valley Today. I'm here with Executive Director of the Kendall County Health Department, Amaal Tokars. Amaal and I have been talking about mindfulness. We've been talking about, first of all, we talked about the explanation of what it's all about, some of the reasons that it happened, and why it's important to be mindful of what's going on around you. Amaal, do you want to talk about anything else regarding that, or do you want to talk about some of the solutions that you might find that are helpful for people to be able to, or if they find themselves in a predicament where they just can't get out of it, what they might do next?
So some of the solutions involve trying to infuse gratefulness when we can into our mindfulness. So let's just say that there's a situation that is bothering us. Let's just say that it's socioeconomic. Sometimes to realize, you know what, I know that there are these circumstances that are so much more difficult, and here's what I know I'm able to do. That gratefulness gives us energy to see beyond this. Mm-hmm. And a relational situation, as you brought up, if there's somebody that's really being aggressive towards us, we may say, you know what, they may not realize what they're doing. They may have a hard time controlling what they're doing, and if I can control what I'm doing, then I'm grateful for that. So gratefulness is very important. Also, we can use mindfulness in advance of problems. So let's just say that we are preparing to do something that's very challenging. For some people it might be giving a speech. For some people it might be trying to figure out getting through a problem.
Or Christmas dinner.
That's right. And because holidays are a great source of anxiety.
They are.
Anything that really can get us stirred up. Mindfulness is something that can help. Christmas is a wonderful example, and the holidays, because we can lose our joy over it and tumble into the new year thinking, I'm exhausted, rather than,
wasn't that wonderful?
That's right, and it's just normal.
Yeah.
But you brought up a great example. Anything that has a lot of energy and a lot of detail and a lot of layers and expectations, that's a great thing to use for. It's also a great thing to use for nostalgia. So here, and to not get exasperated. So here's just a little example. When I was coming over to the radio station today, I got behind a school bus on a country road, and this school bus was stopping at houses on a country road. You know, they stop very slowly, several, and you can't pass.
Right.
It wasn't a road that I could pass on. And so I could have gotten aggravated.
Right.
It actually added many minutes, not a couple, to the drive,
Right.
because I was behind this bus for some time. But you know what I noticed instead? These young families, I realized, all these houses have young families.
Isn't that great? Yeah.
What a precious time, and also what a challenging time, because some of these young families have a lot of pressure on them. But I thought that's a precious time in life. So mindfulness can do many things. So now you're confronted into a challenging situation with, you mentioned maybe a coworker, someone you know. What mindfulness can do is help slow it down.
I'll tell you what, Amaal, we're going to have to slow it down now because we're out of time.
Okay.
But we're going to go right over to 107.1 WSBY radio, and you can pick us up right there. Thank you very much, Amaal, for coming over. We'll get you back again, and we'll figure out part 2 of all this. How about that?
Thank
Thanks
you.
for joining Fox Valley Today.